Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how to break free from the matrix system of control. First, we're going to identify 3 ways that we're dependent on this system of control. And then I'm going to give you 4 paths that humanity could take. We're going to evaluate which path is the best to overcome this system of control. I have little Bean with me today. I just sat down to record this video and she started meowing outside my door. And when I asked her what she wanted, she said she wanted to come in. And it sounded like this. Meow. So she'll be joining us today. A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video about the 5 things that we need to be doing right now leading up to the election in the United States. First, I want to say I got an incredible amount of very positive and supportive feedback, which you guys, thank you so much. That type of feedback inspires me to create more videos. So here we are today. One of the points I made in that video was that if we want to see change on a global scale, if we want to create a better world on a global scale, we need to stop depending on our politicians and all the systems that are in place to control us. And we need to focus on our spiritual expansion. Because what we see in the world is supported by our collective state of consciousness. And the number one question or complaint even that I got on that video had to do with the practicality of this. That all sounds great, but practically speaking, how is just being nice and loving going to actually fix the problems in our world? And people are arguing that no, we actually need policy change. Like we actually need to vote. And then other people were asking the question, okay, I get what you're saying, but practically speaking, how does that work? Practically speaking, how do I become sovereign within myself and become less dependent on these systems that are controlling us? We're going to dive into all of that today. I think if we're going to address the issue of how do we become sovereign and less dependent on the systems that are controlling us, first we have to identify all the different ways that we are dependent. So I'm going to give you 3 ways that we are dependent on what I'm calling the matrix system of control. It's basically just this interweb of control of various systems that are put in place, whether it's the government, the education system, the financial system, the food supply, medical companies, and whoever's at the top of all of those things, whoever's pulling the strings in all of those different systems. Some people call it the deep state. I'm not going to get into an argument about who or what. So first, we're going to identify 3 ways that we're dependent on this system of control. And then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. What are our options? I'm going to give you 4 paths that humanity could take. We're going to evaluate which path is the best to overcome this system of control. So first way that we're dependent on the matrix system of control is that we are physically dependent. In the world in which we live right now, we are dependent on a global supply chain for food. And most of that food is monocropped, GMO, heavily sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, has a low nutrient content. How did it get this way? Well, some of the intentions are good. We're trying to figure out how to feed 8, going to be soon 9 to 10 billion people on this planet. But the system that we've created to deal with that is not working. And unfortunately, the food system is bought out by the drug companies. It is bought out by cigarette companies who then put all of their chemicals into the ultra-processed food supply. So the people who are really in charge of our food supply at this time do not have our best interests in heart. They're interested in getting us addicted so that we continue to come back for more, or in making us sick so that we will then buy pharmaceutical pills. We're also dependent on the system in the sense of our water supply. And again, this isn't all a bad thing. We have sanitized water. That's a huge development for humanity. We no longer live in the days where we risk getting a bacterial infection because we've drunk contaminated water. However, the system that we currently have is not ideal. because our water supply, while it may be sanitized, is also full of pesticide runoff and pharmaceutical drugs that have been flushed down people's toilets. The chlorine and other chemicals that are used to treat it are killing off our gut bacteria. It's been demineralized. It's lost its structure. The water that's running over a waterfall or in a clear mountain stream, that water is full of hydrogen gas and minerals and things that give life to the human body. Our public water supply is devoid of that stuff. It's been stripped of that stuff. We're dependent on the system for energy. And even though we have sustainable energy sources available, and I'll link my interview with Thomas Vallone where we go through multiple sustainable energy sources that humanity has available. But because they would be sustainable, because they wouldn't make billions of dollars for the people who control them, we have not yet made the switch over. So there are certain things that, in my opinion, should be free or affordable at the very least. They should be accessible. It's a human right to have access to, and those things would be species-appropriate food. There is no other species living on this planet that eats anything aside from a species-appropriate diet. Every animal living on this planet knows intuitively, instinctively what it is supposed to eat, and it eats that. Humans, we have become so disconnected that we can't even agree on what a healthy diet is anymore. That information should be available to everyone. And species-appropriate food, fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, sustainably raised animal products if you choose to eat those, shouldn't cost an arm and a leg. People shouldn't be struggling to provide species-appropriate food to their children. Nobody should be living in a food desert where they don't have access to give their children fresh fruits and vegetables. It is a crime against humanity that we're in the situation that we are, where so many people are growing up without access to the foods that will nourish their bodies, and then they suffer with debilitating health conditions and die an early death because of it. Another thing is, like I said, access to fresh, hydrogenated, structured, mineralized water that gives life to our bodies. Another thing that should be accessible to everyone is energy. We shouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg for energy to power our homes so that we can live our lives and contribute to society in the way that we are meant to. With free sources of energy available, nobody should be having to pay to keep the lights on. Another thing is access to medical care. So many Americans right now are in a situation where they have to choose between paying the energy bill and paying for their kids' dentist appointments, for instance. Ask me how I know, because we struggled financially to the point where we couldn't get insurance. I had 2 pregnancies without insurance. Nobody should be in that position. So we are very dependent on the systems that are in place to provide us with basic things that humans need to survive and be healthy. And so many people are working 3 jobs just to try to provide the basics: food, energy bill, healthcare. And they work their entire lives away and don't have any time for self-reflection. How can we become less dependent on the system for our physical needs? Obvious answers would be that those who have the accessibility and the financial ability to do so need to take charge of their own health by supporting the farmers that are providing species-appropriate food that is not covered in pesticides, that is not full of chemicals. And the more that people that are able to pay for that can increase the demand, the more accessible it will become. Also, the more that we feed ourselves the right foods and make other simple steps to take care of our own health, such as getting more sleep, meditating to lower our stress levels, less screen time and more outside time. All of these things contribute to an overall healthier body that will become less dependent on the pharmaceutical-run medical system. Again, unfortunately in our society right now, it takes a certain amount of financial stability to be able to do this. You can't see an alternative doctor that will help you get your health in order rather than just giving you a pill if you don't have the money to do so. You can't get good sleep if you're working 3 jobs to try to raise your kids and get through school. If you're financially able and you have the accessibility, we have to make more sustainable and conscious choices to carry everybody else for the moment and to try to shift demand as much as we can. Number 2 way that we are dependent on the system is that we are socially dependent. We look to the government to take care of us in ways that we could be taking care of each other. This is probably the point that I have the least personal experience with and knowledge on, but I'm going to mention it anyway because it's really important. It would require an entire restructuring of society. Imagine if we weren't dependent on the government for healthcare because we took care of each other. We came together to help each other out with medical bills. And there are some options out there right now with health share companies that do something similar to that. Imagine if we weren't dependent on a supply chain from across the world to provide us with our food. Imagine if nobody lived in a food desert because we work together to produce and distribute healthy food. An example of somebody who's doing this is Kamal Bell, who will be on my podcast in December, where he has his own educational farm where he raises food, teaches kids how to raise their own food, and then he works with other organizations in the community to get that food onto the plates of people who live in food deserts and don't otherwise have access. This is, in my opinion, what an enlightened society would look like. It looks like each person providing from their own skill set and experience set what they're able to in society, and all of us working together to make sure that everybody is taken care of. It could start simply by building a community in your area and starting to do life together. And then looking at how can we help each other out? What do I have that I could offer? And what do you have that you could offer? And how could we trade services? How can we support each other? And the third way that we are dependent on the system, and this is the point that I think people are the least aware of, and also the one that I can personally speak to the most. The third way that we are dependent on the system is that we are mentally dependent on the system. This is the number one way that people are enslaved, and most of us are not even aware of it. So I'm going to back up a little bit and explain something about how the brain functions. You guys have probably heard the phrase, give me a child till they're 7 and I will give you the man, I think is how it goes, but the man or the woman or the human. That's because when we are young, our brain is in a highly programmable state. There's 5 major brainwave states that I'm aware of. There's delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. Delta is the state that we are in when we are asleep. Theta is the state that we're in. It's called the twilight state, between sleeping and waking when we're highly impressionable. This is also the hypnosis state, where people can go in and change the way that their brain is programmed. The third state is the alpha state, and this is relaxed attention, still somewhat impressionable and programmable. The fourth state is beta state, and this is like the high alert stress state. And the fifth state is gamma, which is the brainwave state that people enter into in an ecstatic spiritual experience. Babies, when they are born, are in delta brainwave state until they are 2 years old, which means that they are intensely being programmed. Then up until the age of 7, children are in the theta state. That's why we don't remember much before the age of 7 to 8 years old, most of us, because we're essentially in hypnosis. Everything that's happening in our environment is going straight into the subconscious mind and forming the programs that we will then live the rest of our life by. These programs will play out unconsciously for the rest of our lives unless we consciously go in and change them. Then up until I think it's about the age of 12, children are in the alpha state, which is still programmable, but less so. And then after the age of 12, of course, we develop the ability to go into beta, and we're mostly in either alpha or beta in our waking state for the rest of our lives. So humans are being programmed. For our entire childhood, we are being programmed by our environment. And this is designed to help teach us how to function in society. But when you're living in a society that is by and large not healthy, that is suppressed, that is controlled, that is miserable, then that's what our kids are being programmed with. That's what we were all programmed with. And my personal opinion is that the people in charge, whoever they may be, are aware of this and are using it to their advantage. There's a couple of ways that this plays out. There is direct and obvious programming through means like news outlets and advertisements. And even things like kids TV. I mean, how many kids programs do you know that are just crap? They're just full of crap. Like arguing and bickering and unkindness and disrespect and deceit and on and on and on. And it's like most kids shows, I wouldn't even let my kids watch them because those are not the values I wanted them to learn at those young ages. It's like, it's obvious something intentional is going on here. But even more subtle than that is the indirect programming. Indirect programming happens just because, by and large, people are miserable. By and large, people's consciousness is being suppressed. By and large, people are struggling. Why is it that these same patterns keep playing out over and over and over in society that drive people to addiction, depression, suicide? Why do we have things like abuse and rape and school shootings and child trafficking? It's a playing out of the momentum of collective consciousness and is showing where the collective consciousness of humanity is at. These things happen because people collectively are miserable. I'm not saying that because you may be miserable in your life that you're responsible for a school shooting or child trafficking. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm just making the correlation that when everybody is miserable, when everybody is struggling to get by, when everybody is running these same programs over and over and over in their mind of limitation and lack, I'm not good enough. I hate the way I look. When I get this, I'll be happy. I need this other thing to fulfill me. The momentum of the buildup of that from billions of people collects waves of darkness that manifest more intensely in the horrific things that we see happening in society. I'd be willing to say that the people that actually commit those kinds of acts have some of the worst mental programming, worst image of themselves, worst view of themselves and society and other humans. Child trafficking, for instance, would not be a thing if millions of people were not clicking on child porn videos. And why is that happening? Because people's mental dialogue from the time that they're a young child is being programmed that you need something outside of you to satisfy you. You're not enough. You're not satisfied. You need this, you need that, you need the other thing. More and more and more and more. I should put a caveat here that I am not a mental health professional and I'm not trying to diagnose or treat anything here. I'm just sharing my thoughts from a spiritual perspective. I mean, you can take anything. Why is it that kids go through the terrible twos? That teenagers are rebellious? Why is it that we experience so much discouragement and depression and mental turmoil throughout the course of our life? Is this actually necessary? How much of it is part of the human experience, because we do go through insane challenges here, but how much of it is a result of thought constructs in the collective consciousness that get embedded in our subconscious that just keep playing out over and over and over, generation after generation after generation. And there's these direct forms and indirect forms of programming that are keeping us trapped in these same thought loops. You'll never be able to fulfill your dreams. You're going to have to grow up to work a job that you hate. Even if you're not directly told that, you watch this playing out. You see your parents and your friends' parents going through this. It becomes the reality in your subconscious. You're going to be miserable. You're going to hate your job because everyone else does. I remember when I got my first job, all my coworkers hated their job. They hated their life. They complained about the weather. They complained about everything. They complained about the people they had to work with. They complained about the supervisor, the residents at the assisted living home we worked with. Everything was complain. And I remember being like, well, no, why would I want to be miserable? I can love my job. I can enjoy what I do. Why not? We have to change our programming. We have to change the way that we're thinking. The way that we are thinking is causing us to be dependent on the systems that try to control us. We believe we have to be miserable, so we work a job our whole life and we're miserable, and then we're dependent on that job because we're too miserable to see that there could be any other option. I don't want to dismiss or downplay any of the very real problems that people are facing. In fact, just this week I posted some polls on my YouTube community page to gauge where people are at and what I can offer you guys that's most going to benefit you. And when I asked the question, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in your spiritual journey right now? So many people responded with absolutely heartbreaking things like constant chronic pain, mourning the death of my child, job loss, The suffering that we experience here is very, very real. And I don't mean to dismiss that in any way or victim blame by saying it's your fault because of the way you're thinking. But what I am saying is that these two things are very intertwined. This collective subconscious is an entity almost that is filled with thought constructs that dictate the experiences that play out in our lives. And while we can't always control things that happen to us, we can learn to take charge of our internal state and how we perceive and think about our lives. We can take our power back by changing our internal dialogue and our subconscious beliefs about what's happening. All right, let's move on. We've covered the 3 ways that we're dependent on the system. And because of these 3 things, the physical dependence, the social dependence, the mental dependence, we are collectively spiritually suppressed. Or could be the other way around. Because we're spiritually suppressed, we are dependent on an outer system to control us. It's hard to say which came first because they're so intertwined. But somebody who is spiritually unaware needs outer governance as a motivation to make moral choices. And that governance comes at the cost of sovereignty. That governance can keep a population further spiritually suppressed, or it can serve as a catalyst for awakening. When the government oversteps, when the systems overstep and apply too much control and suppression, as we've seen in the US over the last few years, a population can be driven to a mass realization that the protections and security offered by the systems of control are not worth their sovereignty and free will. And this is where we are at right now. We are at a crossroads where we have had this realization. So many people have had this realization over the last few years. And we have to decide how we will move forward. And this is where I'm going to share 4 possible paths that humanity could take and explain which of those paths I think is the most optimal. Number 1, we could take the path that humanity has taken frequently throughout history, and that's the path of violence and revolution. We could say we've had enough of this control. We're going to fight violence with violence, force with force. We're going to come up against you and we're going to overthrow you and start something better. And I would hope that I don't need to spend too much time here and point out the fact that that only perpetuates the cycle. Because when we use violence against violence, we create more violence. When we use force against force, we create more force. Any new system that is created by that route will eventually become just as corrupted as the system it overthrew. Am I saying that there is never a time for violence? I think that sometimes in this world that we live in, there are situations where force is necessary. Like overthrowing Hitler was necessary to save millions of lives from being wiped out. However, even in situations like that, it's not ideal. We may be backed into a situation where that's our only option because of the state of consciousness that we're at. But as we continue to evolve and grow, I think we'll become more and more capable of coming up with creative and more effective options that do not use violence. And in most cases, I would say violence is absolutely not necessary, nor do I think it is necessary now. The second option is to go the route of politics, which most of the people who disagreed with my previous video on the election were suggesting that politics is the route to take, that policy change is very important. And I would agree that politics can be an effective route. There's nothing wrong with going that route. However, especially in our system today, it's hard to enact lasting change through politics. Because take the President of the United States. They're in office for 4 years. And then the next candidate that gets in can do their best to undo whatever that previous candidate enacted. So it's kind of like a really slow motion, laborious, long route to go the route of politics, in my opinion. Can we enact change purely working through the political system? I don't know. I mean, if that system is controlled by higher forces and all the candidates we're being presented with are puppets, then I don't even think that's going to be enough. So I don't think that's the ideal route. I'm not telling people not to vote. I'm not telling people not to push for political change. In fact, people like Casey Means, right now are really pushing hard for policy change when it comes to what's allowed in the food system. And I'm a huge proponent of her work. I think that is a worthy cause, and I really admire her for taking on the political battle with that, for pushing so hard and so publicly for policy change, because that's something that could immediately affect our children's health. There are some times when it can be effective, especially if there's a route we can take to get immediate change on something. But the main issue that I do have with going the political route is that it tends to divide people. People tend to get so wrapped up in their political candidate and their political viewpoint that that's all they can see, and they start seeing people who have a different opinion than them as the enemy. And as long as we are operating from a mindset of I am right and you are wrong, we will continue to create more division. And ultimately, it does not matter what successes we have with policy change, the division will tear us apart from the inside. So if you're going to fight for policy change from a place of oneness and service to humanity and acceptance of all people, then go for it. But if it's causing more division, then it's not going to be successful long term. The third path that we can take as humanity is that we can start to enact better systems. Like I alluded to earlier, each one of us can start doing our part. Farmers can start choosing sustainable farming practices. And if they're not able to afford to do that, then they can learn from people who are doing it, like Joel Salatin. There's so many things that need doing, and we just have to get creative about how we're going to do it. We have to look at what our strengths are and how can we serve, and how can we not only serve individually, but how can we come together with other people to make this happen? How can we collaborate? It's going to take all of us. And it would require an entire restructuring of society, but it just starts with the small steps of people figuring out, what can I do? What can I create in my corner of the world? What can I offer? And the more we can do this, the less dependent we'll be on the global systems that are trying to control everything. How can we provide better education systems? How can we provide free information? How can we provide alternative health care? How can we provide better health insurance options? How can we provide cheaper or free energy sources? How can we provide any number of services that are necessary for humans to survive and thrive? How can we better allocate our resources? How can we become more sustainable and create less waste? How can we offer healing services to people? How can we offer mental health resources to people to start undoing some of this programming that we're all growing up with? How can we offer spiritual training for people so that they learn early on how to be present, how to concentrate, how to meditate, how to go within? How can we offer these things to people in a way that is financially sustainable and makes things accessible for people? We're going to have to get creative about how to do that. And a lot of times, I think it could look like just finding a way to work together with people, coming together and everybody pitching in and sharing their individual skill. And then we all benefit each other. We lessen the financial burden and we lessen our dependence on outside systems. I think that this is a great option for humanity, but I also do not think that this will be successful or even get any momentum without the fourth path. And the fourth path is the path of spiritual awakening and consciousness expansion. And this was the whole point of my previous video and what I really wanted to explain a little bit more. Everything we've talked about up to this point is great. People have to come together. People have to help each other out. We have to figure out how to restructure society. We have to create better systems. Practically speaking, how is that going to happen? Up until this point in human history, we have not been able to accomplish this because we keep repeating the same cycles. Really, when it comes down to it, the only way to throw off the control of those who have tried to suppress us is to no longer have any need for that control. People who are governed within themselves do not need outer forms of governance. And we have not yet reached that place collectively, but it is possible for us to do so. In order for people to become less dependent on the system, in order for a movement like I just got done describing, where we all come together, provide our own resources and help each other out, in order for a movement like that to flourish and take hold, it requires an awakening in consciousness. Because it requires people to be self-governed, to be sovereign within themselves. It requires a critical mass of us to not need the government to force us to do things in a moral way. So how do we, from a spiritual perspective, take back our sovereignty and become powerful, become self-governed, become sovereign? We do it by going within, by developing the soul, developing the spirit, learning to identify with ourselves as an infinite, abundant, limitless spiritual being. When you know yourself as limitless, when you know yourself as abundant, you become independent of outer sources of provision and security and safety, because you are already all of those things within you. This looks like developing the core of who you are. It looks like being able to locate and tap into and access yourself as a spiritual being, being able to feel that tangibly and learn to identify as the spirit rather than the ego or the body. It looks like developing basic meditation skills to enhance and strengthen your energy field, your spirit, that metaphysical part of you that is connected to source, from which everything flows into your life. It looks like developing basic manifestation skills, because when you can manifest abundance, you don't need a bunch of stuff that they're advertising to make you happy. When you can manifest love and bliss and inspiration and purpose, you don't need the government to tell you, oh, you need this to make you happy, you need this to fulfill you. Become fulfilled from within. You access higher states of consciousness where you're genuinely happy and fulfilled. People ask me this all the time. How does a spiritual awakening help you out practically, like financially, with this real life situations that you're in? And the most blunt way to say it, I guess, is that when you can manifest money, you don't have to worry about having your needs provided for. Spiritual awakening is a consciousness shift in which you begin to identify as the spiritual being that you are. And you begin to experience yourself as a part of source with a, as Jesus said, a spring of living water within you. What he was talking about is the fact that you are source. You are God. God is within you. It is what you are. God is infinitely abundant. Anything that you could need can be provided from within yourself. It flows through your self-expression as you manifest the fullness of who you are as a spiritual being. I could, if anyone's interested, do another video outlining some of these basic practices that you can learn. They are all over the internet for free. Pick your YouTube video. Pick your spiritual teacher. You can learn how to meditate. You can learn how to manifest. It's all out there for free. Anything that you could hope to learn tailored to your individual situation is all out there for free. In fact, I have a free course in my membership called Connect to Your True Self that will walk you through the first step of what I just outlined, how to connect to yourself as a spirit being, how to tap into that and start to access that for free in my membership. I'll put the link below if you'd like to check that out. For those of you who are really interested in this and would like to dive deeper with me specifically, I do have an intensive 8-week course where I walk you through the process of having a guided spiritual awakening. We start at the very beginning with the very basics of accessing the metaphysical spiritual part of you from which sovereignty is accessed, where you access your own internal power, your own magic, as I like to call it. We start at the beginning with accessing that, and then we walk step by step by step through the energy centers of the body, how to alchemize emotions, how to shift thought patterns, how to completely transform your consciousness from feeling controlled and suppressed and stuck and lacking and miserable into a powerful manifestor. In the last couple of weeks of the course, we reach a point where I'm teaching you advanced manifestation skills so that you can step into your power and become the sovereign being that you are, that you can create out of that spring of living water that is within you anything that you can want or need in this life. Every week for 8 weeks after you purchase the course, you'll receive a teaching video from me where I'm breaking down the process of how to have this guided spiritual awakening, making it very simple and easy to understand. Each week there's also a powerful guided meditation to help you implement the teachings and start to shift your consciousness. And there's also 4 daily practice videos to help you take the information that you're learning into bite-sized pieces. And here's exactly what I can do today to implement this. It might be a journaling prompt. It might be a simple thing that you can say to yourself to rewire a thought pattern, a technique that you can use to shift your consciousness. Just something really simple. 4 simple practices per week outlined for you. And those are delivered in the form of little videos, like 5-minute videos. Hi, here's your practice for today. Let's do this together. On top of that, anybody who signs up for my course in the month of November, I am also offering 2 months to my private membership for free, where you will get access to weekly live coaching calls from me, where you can come with your questions. Hey, this is what I've experienced in my course practice this week. What do you think about this? Or can you explain this better? Can you help me with this? And I'll be there to give you some live coaching every week. You'll get access to our exclusive community chat, where we have discussions about spiritual topics together. We have forums where we get to go in depth, and then a gratitude chat channel, for instance, where we share every day what we're grateful for. We just have fun together. It's a place where you can feel understood and supported by like-minded people. And when we get a bunch of people doing the course together, the energy is just fire. It's just the best experience to learn and discuss and grow together and support each other and cheer each other on. And you'll also have access to the monthly live workshops with guests. In November, we have Carrie Bennet. In December, we have Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan. In January, we have Sarah Grace. In February, we have Christian Sundberg. Whenever you sign up, you'll have access to the next 2 months live workshops, as well as the workshops that have already been pre-recorded. Those are available on demand. I'm looking for 20 people to take this journey with me as we come to the end of 2024. Let's end the year on the right note. This is one of my very favorite things that I do, guiding people through this process. And I really, really love it when we get a nice group of people together to help each other and do this together. But I'm maxing it out at 20 because any more than that and I won't be able to give you the individual attention that you need. So sign up today because this is going to fill up fast. Don't miss out. The link is right here or in the description. I'm looking to work with people who are serious about a spiritual transformation, who really want to start to experience more internal power and sovereignty in their life and a higher state of consciousness of joy and purpose and inspiration. If that's you, don't wait. Sign up today and you will get access to 2 months of membership for free along with the course. That's all I've got for you today. Let me know what you'd like to hear about next in the comments. And don't forget to check out my other channel here, where I do response videos to comments on this podcast channel and share a little more in depth about my own thoughts and teachings. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.